you can all respond to the prompt and get going. Jackie's with us now. Hello there, and Oscar. Good. Okay, so now we have looks like we have a quorum, I guess, so we can go ahead and get going. Still missing a few folks, but they will trickle in, I am sure, I hope at least. Okay, so today, first things first, I'll show you this is not going to be all that stunning, but it's sort of a promissory note from last time. My shirt is another Mayan calendar or Mayan writing system shirt, as you can see here. This one I got in Tulum in southern Mexico, and I'll show you what it looks like up close. There, little. And I can tell you a little more about the Mayan writing system. I promised you I would, and so I like to make good on my promises. It is, as I mentioned last time, it's a writing system that seems historically to be distinct from the languages or the systems, I'm sorry, that we talked about from the ancient Near East or China. And that was when that was finally determined, it was a dramatic step forward in understanding the history of writing, because it meant that there have been at least 2 independent instances of the emergence of writing in human history. And if it's happened at least 2 different times, then it could happen 3rd, a 4th, a 5th time. So there doesn't necessarily have to be any connection between the writing systems of the ancient world that I mentioned emerged around the same time, roughly 5,000 years ago in Egypt, in the Middle East, and in China. There could still be a relationship amongst those, and I mentioned the notion of so-called stimulus diffusion, the diffusion of the idea, even if the particular realization of the idea differs from place to place, but there's no way of getting from those writing systems to anything in Mexico or Central America. So the invention of writing must have happened independently at least twice. The Mayan system, I don't think I gave you this date last time, dates from about 300 BC. The nature of the system, the signs are read right when they're in columns and blocks, like we saw some of them. They're read from right to left, and then you go down and to the next row, and then right to left, and so forth. So it's in that way, it's somewhat like our writing system. It's a mixed, as I mentioned last time, a mixed logographic, that is word writing, and phonetic system. This website that I found is a very useful one, so we can go there now and have a look. This gives you an example of how it can be both word writing. So this is the symbol Bachlam. It means a jaguar, apparently, and written this way, it is simply the word jaguar, pronounced Bachlam. But the sounds can also be represented, and so you get this symbol ba combined with this symbol la, sort of grafted on the bottom, and this symbol for ma. So these can be put together and are read phonetically as ba. That's the first row, and then you go down to the next row. It's not quite as perfect, this left to right, and go down a row and left to right and so forth. But these examples on this side will make that a little clearer. So ba, that takes up the first row, then you go down to the next row, and it's la and ma, ba la ma, giving ba lam. So these are equivalent. This one here is the word written out phonetically. This one here is the word written out as a logogram or word writing. This is another example of the phonetic writing. This is, and here you can see the left to right better. So u, na, then you skip down ka, wa, unakawa, for the verb to battle against. If you compare this one with this one, I can't quite, well, maybe I can't quite get them. Hang on a sec. Yeah, that's a little better. They both have the same word, ahau, meaning Lord. So when you see, in terms of, how does anyone ever figure out what these things mean? When you see signs that are that are at least partially similar, then you think, well, maybe they share something, either that ultimately get put together to figure out the jigsaw puzzle of what the symbols actually mean. So anyway, and here's a guy writing Mayan hieroglyphs, just to show you that it can be done. Chiseling them in stone is some of these are fairly intricate, so chiseling them in stone is quite a skill, I think, to be sure. Anyway, so that's it for the T-shirt du jour. Here's the picture of it. I'm not sure if any of you are so inclined, you can play with those and see which of them are phonetic and which are not, or just word writing. But I don't even know if there are any pieces that recur in any of them. But anyway, just a bit of lighthearted fun to get us going. Okay, I wanted to, before we move into content, I wanted to mention a few things, sort of by way of just sort of looking ahead. Most of you have responded, but you saw my message about wanting to meet with you later this week or next week, just to check in, as it were, to see how things are going with your class and with your other classes in general, whatever. I still have yet to hear from about, I think from about 4 or 5 of you. So if you haven't responded to that, please let me know, and I will let you know by Wednesday what times we can meet. So far, it looks like everyone will get a time that they want. So I think it'll all work out okay. So that's one thing. Please take care of that. The second thing I wanted to draw to your attention was this information about the final exercise. I know we're only now not even a third of the way through the semester, but I did look ahead to the final week, and mark this in your calendar, please, this date of Thursday, April 29th from 12 to 1:45. That's when the final exam is scheduled for. We will not have a final exam per se. We will not have a final exam per se, but there is a final exercise. I want to use that final hour and 45 minutes to good advantage. There will be a collaborative exercise. I guarantee it will be fun. And I mean, fun in the sense that historical linguistics is fun, but it'll make for a good way to close off the semester, I think. And it involves a small group activity, and therefore attendance is mandatory. If for some reason there's basically a medical or COVID related reason for your not being able to be there, I'll make allowances for that, but please mark your calendars now. This is, and I'll remind you as we get closer, but this is the date and time for the this final exercise. And as I say, no preparation is needed. If you've been in class and all along and sort of paid attention, then that's all the preparation you'll need. Okay. that's just for your information. But something that's maybe a little bit more immediate is this term paper assignment. I put it in Carmen, but let me put it in your chat right now for you. So you can look at it as we look at it together on the screen. So one of the requirements, it's worth 15% towards your final grade, is to produce a term paper. I have a number of topics below. So this is a 4-page document, and 3 of the 4 pages are taken up with different topics that you can choose from. I want to I want you to have the experience of working on a topic that is of interest to you and is sort of outside of what we're doing in class. I think you'll learn from it, but it has to be sort of suitably circumscribed. It's really easy. For many of you, this is your first exposure to historical linguistics at all. So it's very easy to get in over your head. So I have tried over the years to choose topics that are doable for people who are students who are in your position, with just maybe as something like 6 weeks of historical linguistics under your belts before you begin to get started on this. Term papers always scare students, or sometimes scare students, perhaps I should say, but they're intended to be learning experiences. But what I thought I would do this time around as a way of sort of alleviating some of the anxiety that there might be is that I want you to select a topic, refine it, that is, figure out exactly what you want to say about it, do your research, develop, and ultimately develop a detailed outline, maybe 3 pages or so, where you describe what the issue is with your topic. You describe the research that you've done. You develop an approach for explaining it, but you don't have to actually put together a 15-page paper. I want you to go as far as you can go without needing to take that final step of putting pen to paper, as we used to say, to produce a large bit of written material. So I think this will sort of bring you to the brink of writing the paper without actually writing the paper, and I'm hoping that will make for a sort of less anxious time with working on the paper. I will also ask you to write a full-page abstract. So there are 2 pieces that will make up the final product that you turn in. One will be an abstract of about 500 words where you explain what the paper is all about, and then an outline where you give me more information about about what the topic is, how you researched it, the kinds of issues that you would look into if you were to really delve deeply into it, that sort of thing. I say my intent is to encourage exploration of a topic in some depth, but relieve you of any anxiety associated with the writing process. There's plenty of anxiety, plenty of reasons to be anxious about all kinds of things in our lives these days, and I don't want writing a term paper to add to that. So the topics are ones that are either lend themselves to a report kind of paper, that is where you figure out what other people have said and you digest that and give me an assessment. Whereas, so like this one about subgrouping or language contact and or an etymological exploration and so forth. Some of them, though, lend themselves to more original kinds of research. So there's a really interesting paper that was written now 40 years ago by Mark Aronoff called Automobile Semantics, where he looked at the the ways in which the names of cars at the time followed a sort of structured semantic a semantic structure in terms of how the make, model, and type were strung together into a compound. So they, a Toyota Corolla SX or something like that. And he just looked at domestic cars at the time, but over the years, students have extended this kind of methodology to other products. There was one woman who was very interested in shoes and fashion, and she did I thought a really brilliant study of using Aronoff's semantic model as a way of describing the changes that took place from year to year in the naming of different shoes. Another student did the same sort of thing with perfumes, which apparently have a sort of nomenclature system of their own that was very interesting. So there's work to be done. He ultimately suggests that there's a sort of division of linguistic labor, and there, as I say, there have been a couple of very interesting and original kinds of work that have come out of this. Another area where original work is possible is looking at your own usage and what kinds of points of variation there are between your usage and others, or how consistent you are with certain things that you vary on, and so forth. Looking at slang, you can collect slang from your friends, even if you're not in a dormitory. You can do a Zoom interview with them, or you can compare your slang with what your parents say or what your parents said at the time that they were your age, just like we did with the bean example from the Upper Arlington youth baseball last week, and so forth. So that there are other possibilities. All of these are, this is one on color terms, the way color terms develop over time. That's another area which lends itself to original research. Some of you who are mathematically inclined might be interested in these mathematical methodologies for measuring language relationships. This one here at the end, working with primary sources online. There's a great collection of papers from the Addams family, not the Addams family of the movie, but the and TV fame, but the Addams who were amongst the founding fathers and mothers of the early days of the USA. John Adams, Abigail Adams, and others, and you can basically do the kinds of textual based studies that we just touched on briefly in class, like between Old English and Modern English, but instead look at 18th century English and English of today, and see what different kind of locutions and expressions and phraseology and so forth that they use. So what I would ask you to do is to start to read this over and start to think about topics that you might be interested in, so that all of this doesn't get put off until the last week, which I know is a temptation to do with long-term assignments. I have a number of sort of milestones that I want you to adhere to. By the end of the 8th week, so roughly a month from now, an indication of your topic in writing. 3 weeks later, a progress report on what you've been doing on that topic. Then 3 weeks after that, a brief abstract, just give me an idea of where things are going with your research. And then the end of exam period, the end of April, the finished assignment, that is the extended outline and the 500-word abstract. These 3 items will be treated as homework assignments. So if you do them, if you turn them in, you'll get a 10. I just want you to do them. This is a way of making sure that you don't leave everything to the last minute. And then the final assignment you actually have, well, we're at the beginning of February, so we have you have 3 months to do this. Should be plenty of time, especially if you're diligent and work on it bit by bit over the next 3 months. So that's all I have to say about this, but I would ask you to please read through the topics and start thinking about them. We're still very early in the semester in terms of the content. So if you don't, if you don't read these and all of a sudden be here, oh, that's exactly what I want to do. Wait, you still have a month to figure that out. And I think we will be covering other topics that might strike your fancy in the coming weeks. So does anyone have any questions about this? No, all straightforward, I hope. Okay. I should say that if you get to the brink of doing all the research and you say, this is so interesting, I actually do want to write a 15-page paper, I'm not going to stop you from doing that. So I guess I should have mentioned that on this sheet. But if you want to produce a 15 or so page paper, that's fine. Then we can consider that to be your, as fulfilling the final, the finished assignment. But all I'm really looking for is this extended outline and the fuller abstract. So I have an idea of what your research has turned up and what you're thinking about. Okay, so that you have that now for your consideration, and I'm happy to talk with you, or if you have ideas and you want to shoot me an email about something you think you might want to work on. I'm of course open to dialogue of that sort. Okay, everyone, all right with all of that? I saw a few thumbs up, so that's good. A few smiles and no anxious-looking faces, so that's good. Okay. Oh, and also then looking ahead, there's a homework assignment that I've assigned for Wednesday. It's very, very straightforward. Very, very straightforward. It's actually a paired assignment that is 5 and 6 go together. It's the same data set, but I want you just to do the sort of most straightforward part of it between now and Wednesday, and then there'll more things get more complicated, and you'll have Wednesday through I think I said Sunday night, whatever's on the sheet to do for the next the second part. But the one that you do between now and Wednesday is very, very straightforward. It's another comparative method exercise. The fun begins when you get into the second phase, but I want you to lay the foundation for the fun by looking at the sort of easier part. So 5 and 6 go together. You do 5 between now and Wednesday, and then 6 from Wednesday into Sunday. Okay, so it's just so you have an idea of what lies ahead for you. Okay, questions, comments, concerns, anything? No? Okay.
Could you go through the exercise, the homework 5, and maybe give us
I'll see how you do.
detail?
I mean, I'll make sure that everyone is on the page that they need to be on to do the remainder of number 6.
Okay.
I almost want to say it's so straightforward that that it's almost impossible not to get the necessary foundation from doing number 5 that you need to get into the more interesting issues. But I'll be sure that everyone's on the same page with that. Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I actually had a look at all of your homeworks for today, and thank you for turning them in a timely fashion. That gave me a chance to read them this morning. There are some rough spots for some of you, but I want to go through both number 3 and number 4 now, so that we're in we're sort of all on the same page about the methodology involved. I know I kind of threw you into working on it without a lot of preparation, but my belief is and always has been, this is the way I teach this stuff, is that it's better for you to sort of get your hands dirty and then see what's wrong than my sort of giving you a cookie cutter kind of recipe, do X, do Y, do Z, and you're all set. Because there are some issues involved that that really come out only as we work through the data and try to deal with it. So so I'll start with the Berman example, and let me go back also to the class notes. Here we are. Yeah. So again, without sort of belaboring this, though I've said it many times, it's an important, I think, to keep this schema in mind as you think about the comparison. What we're really doing is the comparative method. What we're really doing in this is what I refer to as horizontal comparison, comparing two or more languages. In the case of the Berman example, there were 3 languages. With Polynesian, we were dealing with 4. In the simplest case, we just have two languages. I think for number 5, there are 5 languages involved. It's not that things necessarily get more complicated when you have more languages. There's just more material to deal with, but they all boil down to this kind of schema where you're given a lot of, or there's a lot of, there are a number of assumptions that are already taken care of for you. You're told that these are related languages. You're told that these words are comparable in some way, and it's up to you then to figure out in what ways do they actually match up, and what inferences can you draw about that. But this is the basic schema behind what we do in this comparative method exercise. We will eventually talk about how we get to this point, how we understand that these languages are related, how we understand that they derive from a common source, how we understand that we're in a position to compare them like this. But for the moment, you're simply presented with this data in a sort of digested form, and you have to work with that. And where we have then languages that match up in certain ways, and we know that they derive from a common source, we can look to the particularities of the matchings and use that as a basis for projecting back to the starting point. That's what reconstruction is about. As I mentioned, it's like reconstructing the things you see on television all the time, where you reconstruct a crime scene based on the evidence of blood spatter, or where the angle of the bullet, or that sort of thing. You can determine, oh, it must have been shot from close range, from far range. He must have been turned this way. The body fell like this, and so forth. I don't mean to be gruesome, but that's a sort of popular way in which the notion of reconstruction is used. And we're doing more or less the same thing. We're developing hypotheses about the proto-language based on the evidence of the related languages. Really, that's the evidence that we have for the proto-language, is the way in which proto-language elements were developed in the individual languages that we're comparing. The languages we are comparing. That's really what we're doing there. Okay. So we look for matchings. I didn't mean to confuse things terribly, but I wanted you to get comfortable using this the tilde, this squiggle, to indicate the elements that match, just because there's the potential for misunderstanding. If you use slashes, as we do in the textbook, actually in the Hawk and Joseph textbook, slashes can be misinterpreted because they're used for phonemic representations. If you use an equal sign, you sometimes see that. That's misleading, because there are different sounds involved, so they're not really equal. They're sort of equivalent, sort of in the words in question that you're comparing. The sound, those sounds are equivalent, but a theta is not the same thing as a sh. So there's a potential for misunderstanding if you use an equal sign. Sometimes, one I didn't mention is sometimes people use dashes. You know, like, oops, like that. But can anyone see any potential problem with using a dash? Just in terms of potential for misunderstanding or misinterpretation?
We also use dashes for forms that are
I'm
not
sorry,
present.
Oscar, what were you saying?
We also use dashes if a reflex doesn't exist in one of the languages.
Right. Yeah. Dashes have other uses. Like so, in the Burmese example here, I used a dash or a long dash for a word that wasn't represented in the data, and we also use dashes sometimes to indicate position. So the suffix s is in English is the dash is used there. So dashes can get in the way. Also can be potentially misunderstood. That's why I like squiggles. Even though they're a little clumsy to type, they're really easy to do on the blackboard or on paper with a pen. But anyway, so we look for matchings, and we look for we have to pay attention to where they occur. That's what the environment. That's what is meant when we talk about looking for the environment of a particular correspondence. The term that is sometimes used also is context. So the context for a particular sound or correspondence set, that the term is also used. I will probably use environment, but context may slip out from time to time, and you may see it in some of the readings. So what I mentioned that my mentor, Calvert Watkins, said the first step in the comparative method is you have to know what to compare. You know, we have this common expression about comparing apples and oranges, and what we want to do is compare apples to apples. So the same kinds of things. Now, how you know what to compare sometimes only emerges from experience. The more you do, the more you say, oh, you know, I see that it's useful to look at the initial sounds, or sometimes clusters of sounds you need to take into consideration, or typically comparing a vowel to a consonant is going to be problematic, but sometimes that's exactly what you need to do. So there aren't any hard and fast rules, and that's what makes it a little bit tricky, I know, at the beginning as you're starting to do this kind of exercise. But if you the more you do, the more comfortable you feel with it, the better you feel that you can sort of attack these kinds of problems. So you look for matching elements, tempered or guided by a sense of what is likely to match with what. And that's something that you really only can get out of experience. Initial sounds, comparing to initial sounds, a good way to start. It might not give you everything, but if you think about this as a process of developing hypotheses and then testing to see how far you can go with your hypotheses, instead of saying that what you're looking for is some imminent truth that is, but what you're doing is trying to make sense of, and I come back to this, you make sense of exactly this kind of situation. So in the case of our Burmese example, or Burman example, sort of we want to start out by focusing on the what matching elements emerge out of comparing horizontally. That's what I've tried to indicate with this double-headed arrow here. Thwei in Burmese with Sui in Atsi and Sa in Maru. This was made easy for you by telling you just pay attention to nasals and fricatives, nothing else. You could in principle do the same sort of thing with the glides, with vowels and so forth, but those are much more complicated, and therefore for this kind of getting your feet wet type of exercise, you were, I restricted your attention to just fricatives and nasals. But in principle, you could compare any of these elements. And ultimately, we'll see that the comparative method can be used for going way beyond comparing just the sounds of words. We'll ultimately be able to even use the comparative method to compare elements of legal statements between related cultures. We'll see an example of that from Indo-European in a few weeks. So you start with with trying to figure out what to compare, and as I said, looking at the initials is as good a place as any to start. And you see, well, there's a theta corresponding to S, corresponding to S, and the next thing you do is at that point is move on to the next word, because you've taken care of the fricatives. There are no nasals here involved, so you move on to the next word and you say, oh, do I have the same set or not here? And clearly the answer is what? Anyone? The first set gives us theta, S, and S. And what do we get out of the second set? I'm going to give it away in just a moment, but someone want to? Here it is, right? Theta, sh, and sh. So we have these two different sets already in our first two words. We have our theta, and I won't bother with the theta, S, and S, and we have our theta, sh, oops, yeah, there we go, and sh. And then at that point, you've satisfied my what I've asked of you to do, at least as far as the fricatives are concerned. We won't worry about the nasals for right now. Let's just deal with the fricatives and see what we can learn from that. And so the oh, I guess I don't want these in capitals. It doesn't matter. But I like better the way it looks. There we go. So how do we proceed at this point? We've identified the correspondence set, and that's, as you were told, that's all you need to do. And then for each set that you identify, propose a reconstruction. And that's where things get a little bit more interesting. So we often will signal our reconstructions using an asterisk, which is meant to indicate that it's a hypothesis. It's not directly attested. I think some of you are probably familiar with the use of an asterisk for marking ungrammatical sentences, like see me, oops, it's going to look odd in any language. See me, John, or something like that, would be marked in our syntax classes or beginning linguistics classes with an asterisk to indicate that this is ungrammatical, an ungrammatical sentence. But there's a certain way in which the use of the star, the asterisk, for a reconstructed element, I'll just say it's X for the moment, is similar in that an ungrammatical sentence like see me, John, or John, or sees me, John, or whatever, is ungrammatical. There's a sense in which ungrammatical equates to oh well, equates to unattested. In what how are those equivalent notions in talking about syntax, about syntactic strings? Ungrammatical and unattested. Anyone? Is see me, John, is that, or or sees me, John, is that an attested string of English? Oscar, you say no, how come?
Well, ungrammatical just means you don't have evidence of a native speaker producing it. And sees me, John is ungrammatical because most native speakers would say, John sees me.
Right, yeah. Or see me, if it's an imperative, see me, John.
Right.
You know, different intonation groupings. So so if we use the star here for unattested sound, which is what a proto-language sound actually is, there's actually a parallelism between the notion of the star being used to mark ungrammatical sentences and the star being used in historical reconstruction terms. So this is quite standard for the star to be used. And what you're really doing is making a hypothesis about an element in the proto-language that is realized as theta, S, and S in the attested languages. Some terminology that might be useful, we can talk about these sounds. We say they form a, the term that I've been using is correspondence set, right? They form a correspondence set because there's a set of elements that correspond to one another. We can refer to the individual sounds, the theta, the S, and I'll use commas this time. S and S are a term that we can use are reflexes of the proto sound. And one way in which reflex, I hope, makes sense is that we can say that the proto sound is reflected in this outcome theta, this outcome S in the different languages. So these are, I'm mentioning these not to overwhelm you with new terminology, but just this is the way we can talk about these. These are terms that you will see in things that you read in the textbook and elsewhere about these elements. But they're reflexes of the proto sound. They are the outcome, another way of thinking about it, of the proto sound. In the particular languages. Okay, so that's just some terminology. This correspondence set, I don't know how familiar you are with set theory, but we talk about elements in a set. We have the set here of theta, also with an S and an S. Here's a question for you. Is this an ordered set? Any of you had some experience with mathematics? Do you know what I'm talking about when I talk about an ordered set? Does the order of the elements in the listing in the set, does that matter?
I would argue that it does matter.
Okay, why?
Because each sound is corresponding to a specific language.
Right. So the answer is it an ordered set? The answer is yes, because the set of S theta S would actually represent a different correspondence set across the languages. That would be S in Burmese, theta in Otsi, and S in Maru. That would not be the same as theta in Burmese, S in Otsi, and S in Maru. So is it an ordered set? The answer is yes, because this would be a different set of corresponding elements in the languages in question. So the order does matter. In that sense, it's an ordered set, not an unordered set. And that means you have to pay attention to how you state these things in your answer. You can't just say, oh, a T corresponds to a K. Well, where does the T correspond to a K? In what language does the T correspond to a K? It makes a difference for whether, and similarly, if to just skip ahead to the Polynesian example, to take the T and K business, we had this correspondence set in the word for one of the boat words, if I remember right, canoe words, or the forbidden word. If you simply said, oh, what we have here is, compare a statement like that to saying 3 instances of T and 1 K. Are those equivalent statements for describing what you actually find in the Polynesian example? Anyone?
No, because you lose the information of which language has which instance.
Exactly. It doesn't tell you which language has which reflex, which language has which reflex. So this one, especially once you line it up with Maoris, Hawaiian, Samoan, and Fijian, then you have that information about the second one is lacking information about the languages, about which language shows which reflex. Right? Do you all see that these seem like trivial kinds of things, but I know that where some of you struggle just a little bit is, how do I actually express the answer that I'm trying to convey? How do I express that? And that's what I'm trying to signal here. So then let's go back to our to our correspondence set here of so the question is, what to reconstruct? Oops. And this is where the fun begins. And why do I say this is where the fun begins? Because there's a wide range of possible answers, but we can, if we think of the decision to reconstruct something as a hypothesis, then we can say, well, I can compare hypotheses and try to decide which one is a better hypothesis, which one meets the criteria of explaining the facts better than which one. So suppose suppose I reconstructed for this a T, as opposed to a reconstruction like, well, what did some of you, in fact, everyone came up with something. What other possibilities did you entertain? Everyone had an answer of some sort. Someone just shouted out what you did for this one. Anyone?
An S.
S, okay, maybe an S. Did anyone reconstruct something different? I think at least one of you did. What would be another logical possibility here? Logical possibility, not necessarily correct, but logical possibility.
Theta.
Oh, sure, why not? Are there other logical possibilities? The answer is yeah. Anyone? Oscar, what do you say?
Maybe some sort of affricate.
Okay, maybe Affricate. How about this one? How about this one? How would you decide amongst all of these different possibilities? You all agree that these are, I hope that these are logical possibilities. Since what we're doing is advancing hypotheses. What we then do is say, can we compare the hypotheses and rule some of them out as being less plausible hypotheses, less favorable, less compelling hypotheses? How would you do that? How would you argue against this one, for instance? This is maybe the easiest one. The reconstruction with a P. Or maybe is that a good answer? Is that a satisfactory answer? No? I know all of you know the answer, but so don't hesitate to speak up. Kenna says no. All right. Can you unmute yourself and explain why, Kenna?
I just don't. We would have to take so many skips to get over to S and theta for if we start at P, and I think it's just unreasonable the amount of skips.
Okay. Would anyone like to counter what Kenna says? Anyone like to give a different account? So Kenna says that this is unworkable in a certain sense because it's, well, in a sense you're saying it's more complicated than it needs to be. Right? It involves many steps. I think that was exactly what you said, to get from P to S, for instance. So what you're doing there is essentially applying a kind of evaluation metric how do I get from proto-language to reflexes? How do you get there? And if you go back, I keep coming back to this diagram, but if you go back to this statement, anything that you posit as our proto-language sound, it really commits you to saying that, okay, this proto-language sound turned into this reflex in language A, this reflex in language B. So that going back here, well, actually, I know what I should do is copy this. And this may seem very trivial when we're dealing with something like P, but what we're really saying here is that proto-language P developed into S in Maru and so forth. I don't even have to give all three of the reflexes. We can simply say that this reconstruction commits us to this sound change of P turning into S. And you can get there. You could turn a P into a K and a K into a sh and a sh into an S, but it then becomes more complicated than it needs to be, as opposed to a reconstruction that simply says, well, you start with S, for instance. And then how do you get from S in the proto-language to S in Otzi? This is not a trick question. It's really just a very straightforward question. How would you, if we reconstructed S here, how would we get to the S of Otzi? I'm going to wait you out on this one because I want someone to give me the answer, because I want you to verbalize it, because it's so straightforward that it seems trivial, but it's very important to keep in mind. How do we get from the S of the proto-language to the S of the attested Otzi, for instance?
comparing the languages?
As I say, this is not a, don't make this harder than it needs to be. How do you get from our S in the proto-language to our S in Otzi?
With no changes.
Exactly. With you don't do anything at all. You just assume that it remains the same. And we said early on in the first week, we said that we spent a lot of time looking at language change, but in fact, what we find is that more elements are stable in a language over time than change. We pay attention to the change because stability is sort of the default. We assume that things will stay the same. So reconstructing S here gives us the Otzi and the Maru S quite straightforwardly. But what do we have to do to make? Oh, I guess I should maybe do it over on this side. What more do we have to add to our account though? What does this reconstruction not account for directly without? I mean, the Otzi and Maru case or the easy case. What is the what's the more complicated, but maybe not terribly complicated case that we need to add into the mix here? What's missing from our schema here? Go back to our reconstructed, go back to our correspondence set. What's missing between this and our set here and our schema here? Again, this is very straightforward, but I really want someone to say it.
Theta, but I forgot what language it's
Okay,
from.
good. Okay, so the Burmese theta.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, exactly. That's what's missing is the Burmese theta. Oops. And once we have that, and then we have to say, in the same way that this, we say, well, nothing happened between the proto-language and Otzi and the proto-language and Maru, but what must have happened then between the proto-language and Burmese? Again, this is a very straightforward answer. I'm not looking for anything complicated, but I do want someone to say it because I think there's a real value to actually verbalizing it and saying, of course, yes, that's exactly what he's looking for. What is exactly what I'm looking for here? Anyone?
S goes to theta.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this reconstruction commits you to saying that the S turned into a theta in Burmese. And that might seem kind of trivial, but I want you to see what's sort of embodied in this schema. We make a reconstruction. It commits us to saying that there's a change here along this path to Burmese. Nothing happens on the way to Otzi and Maru. We don't have to. We don't have to say anything. So we are then in a position to actually think about this evaluation metric. The P is more complicated than it needs to be. It not only involves many steps to get from P to S, but if we reconstruct P here, then we have a change of P to theta in Burmese, a change of P to S in Otzi, and a change of P to S in Maru. And that's what makes it more complicated, is that you're positing more elements in your solution than you really need to. And this has there's a scientific principle behind this. Anyone know what I'm leading up to here?
Occam's razor?
Occam's razor, yes. Occam's razor says basically, don't make things more complicated than they need to be. So all things being equal, the solution that posits fewer entities is to be preferred. There are many different ways in which Occam's razor is stated. He was a medieval philosopher, and what this really boils down to is what the Greek philosopher Aristotle referred to as the law of parsimony. In science, we want our explanations to be as parsimonious as possible. And possible there means all things being equal. They have to account for the facts. It's not just that positing fewer elements, it makes for a better solution. It's if they both account for the facts equally, then the solution that has fewer entities, that posits fewer constructs, is to be preferred. So it's equivalent to Aristotle's law of parsimony. Now, some of you, when you look at your homework assignment, you'll see that you referred to you sort of reconstruct. You said by majority rule. So in the case of like our T, K, T, T correspondence set in the Polynesian example, some of you said, well, I'll reconstruct a T because T is the majority. Majority, now we know the technical terminology, we could say it's the majority reflex. And I wrote on, for everyone who said that, I wrote on your homework that that we'll have a more scientific way of we can boil this down to a scientific principle. It's not just a matter of counting numbers or counting votes, as it were. There's this scientific principle of Occam's razor or Aristotle's law of parsimony that we would refer to. So I would prefer, I'm a big believer in free speech, really, but I would prefer that you not use the phraseology majority rule, because it implies that it's just a numbers game, and it isn't just a numbers game. You have to first be convinced that all things are equal. That is, that the two different accounts give you reach the same end. They offer the same explanation, and then at that point you can say, how many entities do I need to posit in order to get there in solution A as opposed to solution B? And if you think of it in turn, if you think of it, it's really kind of transforming the notion of majority rule into these well-established scientific principles of Occam's razor and Aristotle's law of parsimony. So I would prefer, from here on out, I would prefer that you not use the term majority rule in reference to reconstruction. Use the notion of Occam's razor. Use the notion of Aristotle's law of parsimony. It's better to have Aristotle on your side, really. He was one of the great minds of all time. So I would urge that you do that. And if you think about it in those terms, then we're saying we have a principled way of making decisions between different possible solutions. So I would say no. Use Occam's razor instead. Use that kind of reasoning. Then we're elevating what we're doing to being based on scientific principles. Okay. So how are we doing on this so far? The same kind of reasoning would I think allow us to rule out this one, because it involves more steps. Here, the entities that we're positing are changes. So how many changes do we need to posit to get from our to account for all of the facts in this account as opposed to some other account? And the answer is more than more than we have with this one. All of these where there's something different, something other than S. Now, what about the reconstruction versus the theta reconstruction here. Or for that matter, the S reconstruction as opposed to the esh, the sh reconstruction. Let's look at that one first. Let's compare this with the S reconstruction. How would you distinguish between them, between these two, bearing in mind all of the facts from the Burman languages that we looked at? Are there any additional facts that we would want to bring to bear on comparing this reconstruction, these two reconstructions?
We should also consider the theta esh esh.
Yeah, exactly. So
correspondence.
what about, yeah, exactly. So what about, oops. What about the theta esh esh? Can't type here. Where we haven't made a decision about that. How is that relevant? Who was it? Oscar? Did you say that? How is that relevant?
Yeah, that was me. If we say for theta SS that the proto-phoneme was esh, then we would need to come up with something different to explain the reflexes of theta esh esh, which might be more complicated.
So, okay, so you've made a very important point here. You've said basically that this one cannot be the esh, and why is that? Based on what? Look at the facts here. You're right. I mean, according to the methodology, but I want everyone to be sure about what the methodology, what the underpinning of that methodological step is. What does Oscar's solution? Ask someone other than Oscar to answer. What is Oscar's claim that this that he says in particular? No, it can't be. It can't be esh. What is it based on? He's imputing to this data a certain. He's bringing to it a certain expectation, and what is that expectation that he's bringing to bear on this? Anyone?
That the changes are regular.
The changes are regular. Who said that?
Kyle.
Kyle? Okay, tell me what you mean by that.
So if we posit both the correspondence set theta SS and the correspondence set theta esh esh to have the reconstruction esh, then there's no possible way that it could have descended that way with that kind of split. All of them would have to still be esh or s.
Okay, so you mentioned the term regularity. What we're really talking about, we have an expectation of consistency across the data. That is an expectation that elements in the same environment will behave the same. That's what consistency means. So Oscar and Kyle, echoing him and explaining him, are saying that we have this expectation that that whatever we say about initial theta in Burmese, S in Otzi, and S in Maru would carry over to, well, here's one that has almost an identical environment to number 6. So 3 and 6, we would our expectation is that we should find similar behavior. And in fact, we find something different. We find the sh in Otzi in 6, but an S in Otzi in number 3. And so in general, then we approach this data expecting a certain degree of consistency. And that consistency has a technical notion, a technical term. It's actually a very important guiding principle, and that is the principle of regularity of sound change. The expectation that sounds, the same sounds in the same environments will behave the same way. And we actually have that expectation in sort of in our popular consciousness about language. So there's this sort of mocking way of referring to the a sort of traditional speaker from the Boston area as I parked my car in Harvard Yard. Have any of you ever heard that that used as sort of a way of identifying the Boston dialect, or so that there's an expectation that if you that an R before a consonant, R before a consonant, R before a consonant. You get the idea. I'm having trouble getting it all. There we go. R before a consonant, you will behave alike, and that it would be unusual. Notice here, the R is before a vowel, so something different happens. But the expectation is that R before a consonant will be realized as, well, as an H, let's say, before a consonant. That is as a lengthening of the vowel. I parked my car in Harvard Yard, and it would be unusual to say, I parked my car in Harvard Yard, for instance. That would be, in fact, we could mark that as unattested. I parked my car in Harvard Yard, where only Harvard undergoes the change. So the same environment, we would expect the sounds to behave in the same way. My father used to tell a sort of silly joke that a man goes into a restaurant and orders a plate of kidney beans, and the waiter says, "Kidney beans? You mean kidney beans, don't you?" And the guy says, "That's what I said. Diddle I?" What's funny about that? I know it's not very funny. I know it's not a very funny joke, but what is sort of mildly amusing about that? I saw a few of you smile. What is mildly amusing about that as a joke? I'd like a plate of kidney beans, please. You mean kidney beans? That's what I said. Diddle I? What is he trying to say with diddle I? Anyone? If you can't figure that out, then there's no hope that this will even raise a smile. What is he saying here? What is he trying to say? Didn't. Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's what I said, didn't I? So the joke hinges on the expectation that DN in kidney would behave the same way as DN in didn't. Now, from a phonetic point of view, this is a consonantal N and this is a syllabic N, but this is a joke. This isn't a linguistics dissertation. But the humor, to the extent that it's a joke at all, the humor hinges on an expectation that sounds in the same environments will behave in the same way. So it really rests on this assumption of regularity of sound change when we put it into more highfalutin terms. So for that reason, if we reconstruct a sh for this one, suppose we decide to do that, then then we can't reuse the sh here, because that would violate the expectation of elements in the same environment will behave the same way. It would violate the expectation of regularity of sound change. So we now have another principled basis for deciding between different competing hypotheses for our reconstructions. And it'll turn out that this notion of regularity of sound change is absolutely crucial. It is the single most important piece of apparatus that we have in our historical linguistic tool bag. It is the single most important tool that we have. It'll come up again and again and again. You'll get tired of my referring to regularity of sound change, but it'll become so important that 9 times out of 10, if I ask a question, you can give the answer regularity of sound change, and you'll be right. It's absolutely foundational to so much of what we do. And one of my goals in this class is that you understand the importance of this notion of regularity of sound change. And it shouldn't really be all that hard, because in a sort of a popular way with these sort of dialect joking dialect utterances and silly jokes like kiddly beans and so forth, we have it's built into our expectations about language that there will be some consistency in what we see. Where it gets a little bit more technical is that the consistency really resides in sound change. We will see that there's a basis for inconsistency for a non-regular behavior in other aspects of language change, but sound change seems to rest on this foundation of regularity of change. Okay, so that then gives us a reason for saying, once we take into account this additional set of facts about sh, therefore, that is not a good reconstruction because we want the sh for another correspondence set. And why do we want sh for the other correspondence set? Because of Occam's razor, that it makes for a more compelling, a more parsimonious account to have sh for the sh set and s for the s set. So we've taken these sort of common sense common sense decisions that we make, and we've elevated them to we've given them a scientific footing in the basic scientific principle of parsimony in our accounts, and the linguistic language specific principle about regularity of sound change. So we've actually made some progress towards moving our enterprise into the realm of linguistic science as opposed to just linguistic observation. Okay, we're out of time. I'd hoped to do something similar to this with the Polynesian case, but I mentioned a few points there, and we'll look more at the Polynesian case on Wednesday. Then I've commented on all of your papers, so you can read through the comments, and you'll before class on Wednesday. You're in a position to be able to deal with homework number 5 now, based on what we've talked about here, and just do that. If you want to go ahead and do number 6, okay, but do 5 first and make sure that you're confident about 5. But I guess I would prefer that you do 5. We'll talk about it on Wednesday, and then you can move into 6 after that. Okay. For those of you who haven't told me yet about your available times later this week or next week, please do so, because I want to get those scheduled by Wednesday. Any last minute questions, comments, anything? Okay, great. So good luck to everyone, and I'll see you on Wednesday then. Well, a couple of things in the chat. I'm sorry. Oh, just thank you. Okay, good. Oh, Claire, you got the joke. Good, thank you. Okay, great. See you all.